It's the Jersey Blitz, NJ.com's high school football podcast. Welcome to episode 14 here, as it is championship time, and we are getting ready to break down all 7 New Jersey football state championship finals on this episode. We will have the first 4 games being played at MetLife Stadium, then the last 3 games of the 2024 football season to be played at the home of the Scarlet Knights at Rutgers University. So now let's take a look at all of the games at MetLife. And we'll be kicking off the coverage with the non-public B state final on Friday, November 29th. And the game is kicking off at 11 a.m. at MetLife. And we bring in Ryan Patty. It's a matchup of DePaul Catholic versus Pope John, a game that we actually covered way back when on August 30th in Wayne. DePaul's in its 5th consecutive non-public B championship. And Ryan, is this the best Spartan team of the last 5 years?
I think so, Dan, and we've said it multiple times on the podcast now. They have 2 Notre Dame commits in Nolan James and Elijah Burris, an Ohio State commit in Desi Jones, and the recruiting service on 3 has Derek Zaman as a 4-star prospect in next year's class. So, they're loaded in terms of the skill guys. And then on the O-line, they have Mike Troutman. He's a Penn State commit, and junior Marlon Bright's got a ton of offers. And then on defense, they got Marquette Dorsey, Northwestern commit, and then Deshaun Stewart, Ohio State commit. So we'll see if Deshaun Stewart's going to play or not. But DePaul's had talent like this before, but they haven't put it together like they've done this season. James, Jones, Burris have all combined for 50 touchdowns in their 11 games. And last year, those 3 had 20 touchdowns in one more game in 12 games. So in terms of in team defense, they're playing a lot better as well. Last year, they had 10 takeaways. This year, they have 18. And they've played fantastic complementary football, which is what Coach Nick Campanelli wants. And they've done that for all but like a couple minutes this year. So they didn't really seem ready for the moment last year. They lost to Red Bank in the final last year, but they kind of just never strung wins together last year. They just never got the momentum they need to win a state title. And they've proven to be a well-oiled machine this year. And I think they've been the team to beat in non-public B all season.
Ryan, we were referencing how it was one of the first games that we covered this year, way back in the end of August in Wayne, when these 2 sides met up. And in that first meeting, Pope John actually was holding a lead late in the second quarter before DePaul took the lead and then rolled them in the second half. What does Pope John have to do differently to create a different result this time around? Yeah,
Dan, I was tuned into the broadcast on the way back from Battle at the Beach. I was listening, and the defense for Pope John just unraveled in that game. And for them to win this game, their defense has to play its best game of the season and almost near perfect to win this one. But Pope John just couldn't really get a stop at all. Nolan James was dicing them up, and they're hitting big plays in the passing game. But they've been a lot better on that side of the ball in this postseason run. They've just allowed 31 points in those first 3 games. And obviously they haven't faced a DePaul level offense in those games, but those are positive reps and confidence for that defense there for Coach Dom Gaston. And Tyler Hauser has been a stud for them. He got banged up earlier in the year in that game, actually, and he missed some time, but he's been back for a couple weeks now. And he's been dominant. He's been one of the best linebackers in the state, and he's kind of the heartbeat of this defense. He had 22 tackles last week, a career high 22 tackles, 3 tackles for loss, a sack, and a pick 6. So he was all over the field last week for the Lions. And this is their first state championship appearance since 2013. That's a long time ago. I believe Coach Brian Carlson was coaching the team back then, which feels like forever ago. So I'm expecting this defense to be energized. I'm not sure it's the strength of this team, but, I'm looking for this team to play with a lot of adrenaline, because that's going to be much needed coming into this one against a red-hot DePaul offense, a DePaul offense that really hasn't been stopped all year. And, this is their first state title appearance in 11 years. You got to go out there and play just with everything on the line, leave it out on the field. And, I think Pope John's going to come to play in this one.
What a wild ride for Pope John and Coach Gaston. They were 2-7 starting off the playoffs. We were there for their first round game against Camden Catholic. Now they're a win away from their first state title since 2002. Ryan, what's one thing that you're hoping to see from both of these teams come 11 a.m. on Friday?
Well, Dan, for DePaul, I think their defense has to show up for the full 48 minutes. And, I've kind of said that a couple times on the podcast. And Pope John is going to make adjustments, from that week 0 game. We don't know, like I said, if Deshaun Stewart's playing, and we don't know if All-State linebacker Anthony Natoli's playing. He hurt his shoulder a couple weeks ago. He's been trying to go through it. We'll see what happens on Friday, but I'm skeptical either play, but like I said, we'll see. But, they have to find a way to gut it out anyway. I mean, whether those two play or not, you got to find a way to go out there and play good for 48 minutes on defense. And, with the exception of the couple minutes against Del Barton there at the end of the game, this team's played really good complementary football. I mean, there's not a whole lot to nitpick with DePaul this year. So, we're going to see if they could do it for one last week and put it all together. Coach Campanelli, he's a great coach. He gets the most out of these kids. And, I think that they're going to just lay it all on the line. There are a lot of seniors on that defense, and I'm expecting them to just bring it and leave it all out there. But for Pope John, I think it has to be the Tyreek Hill show. I think we got to see a lot of Tyreek Hill. He's been their superstar. He's got 24 touchdowns this year, over 2,000 yards. He's got 4,000 for his career, and he can score from anywhere. They feed him a lot. They feed him often, and they're going to need his best on Friday. And the offensive line's got to play really well. DePaul, whether they have Natoli or not, they have Logan Nagel in that front seven. Yasir Howell is healthy now. So they have guys in the front seven with a lot of experience who can play some ball. And the Pope John just kind of has to do what they've done the past couple of weeks and carry that momentum, control the clock, and just find a way to establish a line of scrimmage and gut this one out.
So that's the first game of the day that's going to be played on Friday at MetLife Stadium. The second game is going to be for the Group 5 state championship. That game will kick off at 2 p.m. And again, Ryan Patty, does this matchup kind of remind you of the matchup from the last 2 years in Group 5 when it was Passaic Tech taking on Toms River North?
It does, Dan. This Union City build, to me, is a lot like Passaic Tech's build these past 2 years, and the Bulldogs gave Toms River North a good game in those two Group 5 finals the past 2 years. Toms River was never really in danger of losing either game, but they were entertaining games. I mean, Passaic Tech did not go away in either of those games, and Trayshawn Dye was a bit of a one-man wrecking crew for Passaic Tech last year, and he helped them kind of ground and pound, and he played some tough linebacker for them, and that's kind of the style and the brand of football Union City plays. They just play bully ball on both sides of the ball. And I've said it a bunch with Coach Wilbur Valdez. He's had a lot of good teams, but this one might be his best. I mean, they just won a state semifinal game, 42-0. Their wing T is incredible. It's led by Mark Boyd. He's their school rushing leader. He has 24 touchdowns, and he's their wing back. He's one of their wing backs. And their fullback, Josiah Arelis, he's been on a tear. The past 2 games, he's had 328 yards and 6 touchdowns. This team can throw the ball this year, like I've said. Kingston Evans, Khalil Sutton, Kareem Hector, all these guys are good athletes to throw the ball to. Xavier Rodriguez has had a good year passing the ball. And on defense, they have 6 shutouts. They went to Northern Highlands, played a really good game. They kind of smothered them, and they got over their big hurdle against Passaic Tech 2 weeks ago, and in one of the best games I've ever seen, and a game that took absolute guts from Union City. And they kind of had to go out of their comfort zone and go down the field in 49 seconds and find a way to win with the pass. But, their only loss was to St. Peter's. They don't schedule that game to win that game. They kind of scheduled to get better, but, no one expects them to beat St. Peter's. And, I think right now Union City's just got every right in the world to feel like it's on top of the world and, feel like it can do anything. But obviously Toms River North is kind of the standard, and, it's going to be a very tough test for Union City.
Joe Zadalis, Toms River North, they've been the kings of this group the last couple of seasons, back-to-back state champions in Group 5. They have a plethora of outstanding athletes in their secondary on defense that knock down balls. They disrupt the passing game. The question is, how are they going to handle this ferocious run game that Union City will bring to the table at MetLife Stadium on Friday?
Well, I got to admit, Dan, that this game worries me a little bit just because of how Toms River North struggled against Point Pleasant Borough. Point Borough doesn't run a wing T, but it's a run-oriented offense. And as we know, we've talked about multiple times, North only won that game by 3 points. However, as and I've said this all along, Toms River North is kind of a hokey team. And even though, they haven't been overly dominant every single week, they are still undefeated. They still have the state's longest win streak. They're unbeaten in 14 straight playoff games. And in the playoffs, they're averaging 36 points a game on offense, and they're only allowing 14. And they have been especially good, Dan, in the second half. We saw them against Rancocas Valley, where they scored to 35 unanswered points. In the 4 state tournament games, they've outscored opponents 68-14. So, like in a strange way, I almost think this is a Tons River North team that either likes or needs to be punched in the mouth before they wake up. And when they do, it's just a torrent comes out. I've said all along that I don't know that this Tons River North team is the most physical one Dave Iserowitz has had, but I'm pretty sure they're going to find a way. And Tons River North, to me, the big part of their defense is all that speed and athleticism they have in the secondary. Whether they choose to move those safeties down a little bit and choose to play man-to-man on the corner so they can get more people in the box, I will be interested to see. I do think Union City is going to be a big challenge for them, simply because they may be able to consistently be ball hogs and limit Tons River North's possessions and opportunities to score. But man, this team, Tons River North, when the switch goes on, they're going to be bears to try and stop. And I think the good news for Tons River North was delivered by Ryan Patty in his assessment. It reminds him a little bit of Passaic Tech, and we know what Tons River North did to Passaic Tech 2 straight seasons, Dan.
Question also, Joe, for you. I know that Toms River North can put up the points, but how many points do you think is going to be necessary in this state final going against a Union City side that, again, when they're clicking, they might be one of the toughest run teams to go against? How many points do the Mariners do you think are going to have to put on the board at MetLife?
I think there's 2 schools of thought here when you're talking about scores. One, if in fact Union City possesses the ball for significant periods of time, maybe they need 28 to win 28-21. However, if Union City is breaking off long runs and Tons River North is countering that, then it might be 48-41, depending on how Union City plays offense. I don't know Coach Valdez, and I've only heard Ryan talk about him, but I do think he would enjoy taking tons of time off the clock. Like I said, Tons River North is playing well. TJ Valerio had another big game this week, Dan. Three touchdowns again. And, the Tons River North running game is sneaky good. Nobody ever has huge numbers, but at the end of the day, they have 125, 175 yards. And I mean, those receivers are phenomenal. And they've also incorporated the sophomore Cole Garrison, who's come out of nowhere. He had another touchdown last week after a 3-touchdown game the game before.
That has all the makings of a great game. I look forward to calling that one here on NJ.com. So that's our second game at MetLife. Game number 3 is going to be for the Group 1 state championship. Cedar Grove taking on Glassboro. That is scheduled for a 5 p.m. kickoff in the Meadowlands. And bringing on to the podcast, Mike Kinney for the first time. Mike, Cedar Grove, they have been an awesome team. I was again able to cover them for their win against Caldwell earlier this season. And they are a second half team that they've started to really put things together in the second stanza of a game against their opponents on their way to the state championship game.
Yeah, Dan, you're right, absolutely right. Cedar Grove has been a great second half team the last couple of weeks. They just outlast teams with Stephen Paradiso's throwing ability and with their unbelievable receivers. I mean, Jackson Maurice leading that group. They're just fearless. They're in that air raid offense. They just feel as though they can hang with anybody. They can come back from anything, and they're going to beat you with their ability to get the ball downfield. But I would, if I was in their locker room, I'd say, guys, don't be a second half team against Glassboro because you're going to find yourselves in trouble. I think Glassboro is just so good and so tested and so talented and balanced that if Cedar Grove falls behind them, I think Glassboro might find a way to just keep the football and not give it back to Cedar Grove enough times. So they've got to play some great defense against Glassboro. That's going to be absolutely the key. And that's going to come down to, I think, their linebackers. In that defense, they've got to keep people in front of them. They've got to get inside. They've got to get into the gaps. They've got to stop that running game and force Glassboro's quarterback to throw the ball. And I think that could possibly be the weakness that Cedar Grove wants to try to exploit. It's going to come down to Michael Cantarelli and Thomas Canatero, and especially Connor Kearney on that linebacking unit. But we go back to that offense, and we're looking at a guy like Stephen Paradiso. The thing about their passing game in that air raid offense is that you basically, In playoff football, you want to control the clock. You want to move the chains. And the thing is that Cedar Grove can control those chains with Paradiso. He averages 26 throws a game, and yet his completion percentage is 64%. That's amazing at the high school level to throw the ball that accurately, that often. And no matter what the weather is like, the thing is, this year the weather's been pretty warm. Almost like Southern California. They played on Friday nights, and we'll see what happens. What the weather is like on Friday, but it doesn't matter. He's going to throw the ball. Jackson Marie, he's over 3,000 yards this season. Stephen Paradiso, he set all kinds of records. He owns basically every passing record at Cedar Grove now, and we can't forget that David Njoku, as Jackson Maurice owns the receiving records, and we can't forget that David Njoku was a receiver at Cedar Grove not that long ago. And Jackson Maurice is a kid with almost 2,000 yards receiving this year and 5,000 for his career. It's amazing, that offense. They haven't proven that they have somebody who can run the ball with consistency, because their top rushers are Jackson Maurice, the receiver, and Stephen Paradiso, the quarterback. Maurice with 1,700 yards receiving, actually, Dan, is 500 yards over what the team has rushed for. So that's the offense. And that's what Glassboro knows it's got to stop. It's got to try to find some way to pick the ball out of the air against Paradiso and discourage them and frustrate them. Nobody's been able to do it. It's been an absolute flawless and explosive offense. And Cedar Grove, I know, feels as though they can do it again on Friday.
Bringing on to the podcast, Bill Evans. Bill, while we talk about the high-flying theatrics of the passing game for Cedar Grove, for Glassboro, they've been running the ball at an incredible rate, and they've been running with Kenny Smith, who seems like he's a man on a mission to bring home a championship.
Yeah, Kenny Smith transferred in from Hamilton this year. 2 years ago, he was an all-state running back for them. And, that year they made it to the sectional final, and they were one play away from beating Millville, ended up losing that game. Millville ended up winning the state title. And that, I know that still bothers him. He wasn't all state last year, but he still had another very good year. It was just kind of more of a numbers situation. And, he comes in this year, has to sit out the 3 games for the transfer. But regardless, has put up 1,400 rushing yards and 19 touchdowns. So you can imagine what those numbers would be like with 3 more games. Watching him Friday night against Woodstown in the state semifinal in the rain, miserable freezing rain, which he said, it's just the kind of weather that he knows was meant for running, and then knew he was going to get the ball, and just loved every minute of it. And it was amazing just the cuts he was making on that slick field. Ran for 219 yards and a couple scores. So yeah, he's going to be a real key on that side of the ball. Obviously, they can throw the ball as well. Jack O'Connell is another transfer that came in from Gateway. Has shared time with the incumbent, who was Christopher Foster. But we have seen more time in the playoffs, and then obviously he's got some great wide receivers in Amari and Xavier Saab. And then on the other side, I'm really looking forward to the way the Saab brothers and Kenny Foster, their secondary, who've combined for 12 interceptions this year, match up against that great receiving core from Cedar Grove. Brandon Simmons up front is going to need to get a pass rush. He's got 117 tackles and 17 sacks. He was an all-state player last year as a sophomore. And I just think, for a Group 1 game, which I know a lot of times, sometimes on this championship, we can get a little overshadowed by some of the bigger schools. You have 2 very explosive teams, great athletes. Some of the best recruits in the country actually are going to be in this game. Glassboro's, the Saabs both have over 20 FBS offers, and there's the Glassboro's got 7 kids that are committed or they're going to an FBS or an FCS school at minimum. And then there's 2 teams that are 25-0, and I think this could be one of the most exciting games of the championship week.
So that's the 3rd game at MetLife Stadium, and then the capper for the 4th game of the first day of the 2024 NJSIA Football Championships. Well, it's a matchup of 1 versus 2 in the Garden State for the non-public A state championship. Bergen Catholic taking on Don Bosco Prep. Ryan Patty, we bring you back on the show. And in that first meeting in Ordell in the regular season, in just bad weather as well, turnovers were the most glaring factor from that regular season matchup won by BC. What else in your mind stood out from that first meeting back in week 4?
Yeah, Dan, I mentioned this stat on the podcast last week, and it's that Bergen had 24 rushes for 73 yards in that first meeting. And that was the only time this season where you could truly say Bergen's offensive line got outplayed. And Najee Calhoun, junior running back Najee Calhoun, ran for 55 yards on 12 carries in that game. But it wasn't a good day for the offensive line because Dante Kane didn't do a whole lot with 8 carries for 17 yards. And the pocket kind of collapsed a lot on quarterback Dominic Campanelli. He was running around a lot in that game, kind of scrambling and just, trying to extend plays. But they had one nice drive after Bosco tied it up at 14 in the third quarter. And that was really it, though, in terms of like long, sustained, like crisp drives from the Crusaders. And, Bergen was losing the battle up front last week against St. Joe's, especially on the defensive side, because John Forster almost had 100 yards in the first half. But in the second half, Bergen kind of took over on both sides of the ball, but especially on the ground. They ran 15 times for 41 yards in that first half. And in the second half, they did a lot of quarterback power from Dom Campanelli, which was surprising. But Calhoun had a big half, and they went for 163 yards on 31 carries. And the battle at the line of scrimmage is going to be huge in this game. I think it's the most important element in this game. And Bosco did the best job in the trenches for 48 minutes of any team this season against Bergen, and they need to do that on Friday to pull off this win.
Ryan, Bosco's been playing great football, certainly since losing against BC, losing the heartbreaker, the 1-point loss against DePaul Catholic at home. Do you feel that BC going into this game, having played a tougher schedule in regards to having to play St. Joe's in the semifinals, after St. Augustine did put up a good effort against the Ironmen in the semifinals, but going up against a St. Joe's team facing a 14-point deficit late in the third quarter to rally back and score the game's last 20 unanswered points, do you think that's battle-hardened this team that has gone through the wars over the last couple of years, and BC is still the 3-time reigning state champs? Do you feel that that might have been the best case scenario for Coach Vito Campanelli's side heading into the state final?
Yeah, I'm looking back at that game last week, Dan, and I mean, they were down 14-0 in that third quarter. There was so much adversity for Bergen in that game. I remember to start the second half, Dominic Campanelli took a sack, and I was like, holy cow, like they might actually, St. Joe's might actually do this. And then, a couple drives later, I think it might have actually been the very next drive, because there weren't that many drives in that second half because of how much Bergen ran the ball. But there was a 4th and 5 deep in Joe's territory, and, you're pretty much in 4-down territory at that point. And Bergen converted it, over the middle to Quincy Porter. And that was kind of the moment where Bergen's, fan base could exhale and say, okay, like we've got it. We're back in control here. We can win this game still. And they finished the drive with a touchdown run from Dom Campanelli. He punched in another one a couple, later in the fourth quarter. The first one was to end the third quarter. The second one was in the fourth quarter. And then in overtime, Najee Calhoun walked it off. I mean, it was the perfect way for Bergen to overcome that deficit and, kind of just establish its physicality, which it didn't have a lot of in that first half, excuse me. They reestablished it in the second half. And I mean, what an all-time game in that rivalry. And like you said, Dan, what a huge moment for Bergen. That was kind of the, I feel like every championship team kind of has to have that, back against the wall moment. And that might have been it for Bergen. We're going to see. I think this is going to be a great game, a really, really good game. I mean, you can't ask for anything more than Bergen Bosco and MetLife, but that was a big moment for Bergen last week for sure. I mean, they had to answer with their back against the wall, and they did.
Last two meetings between these two schools, Ryan, in the state finals really haven't been that competitive. Bergen Catholic in 2021, they fell behind early, then they rattled off 28 unanswered points, and then certainly 2022, what no one saw coming was the Bergen Catholic 45-0 beatdown in that championship. Is this going to be even a thought this year to be a non-competitive game, or do you think that this year it's different and that Bosco is built differently and they feel they can go toe-to-toe with BC at MetLife?
Man, I'd be stunned if it was, non-competitive, but I think it's an elephant in the room because it's happened the past 2 times, and Bergen has kids who can break the game open, but Bosco's been so sound this season, and I just think it has the makings of it being an amazing game. And I think back to that game in 2021, and Steve Angeli was the quarterback. He's obviously at Notre Dame now. and they had a running back, Ryan Butler, who, if you ask people at Bergen Catholic, they would probably say he's on our all-time Bergen Catholic football team. He'd be one of the running backs on that team. That's how impactful he was. But the 2022 game was surprising. I mean, Bosco had a loss to Iona Prep that year. That kind of surprised me. And, we know how good Bosco was that year. They started the season #1 in our top 20. And, they were still a good team. That loss was surprising to Iona Prep, but they beat Bergen in the regular season. And if you told me Bergen was going to win that game 45-0, I would have told you, no way, you're crazy. And I would say the same this year because of how well Bosco's playing. And I would actually say that this is Dan Sabella's best team. It's for sure it's definitely his best defense that he's had since the 2019 team, which you could argue was his best team. That team had Jalen Berger, Kyle Monungai, and then a bunch of really good FCS players on defense. And, I think that this defense is really good. It's not on par with that, but it's close. And when you look at the quarterback play of Devin Sisler, it's probably the best quarterback play that he's had at Bosco, Sabella, that is. Sisler has 20 touchdowns to just 4 interceptions, and he's completing almost 70% of his passes. So that quarterback play has been a big deal for Bosco, and it's a big reason why they're at where they're at right now.
So, Ryan, what's the one thing that you're hoping to see from each team heading into that non-public A final Friday night at 8 p.m. at MetLife?
Well, I think both teams, it kind of intertwines for both teams. I think both teams have short yardage stuff that makes each offense pretty special. For Bergen, they have the personnel to do a lot in the screen game and the jet game. And obviously, you think of Quincy Porter right away with that. When he catches a bubble, he almost turns into like Calvin Johnson. Like, he just catches it and runs through the whole defense like he's a man amongst boys. And he's always going to be part of the game plan for Bergen. But his brother Brian has been getting a lot better with every game. He's a sophomore. And they used some jet stuff with him last week, and it worked. And we know how dynamic senior Anthony Perotti can be in the jet game. He has the speed to get to the perimeter and really, blow a play open. But getting downhill and getting north and south in the run game is going to be most important for Bergen. But I think their speed, they kind of have an advantage in the speed department with getting to the edge and kind of getting chunk plays by getting to the outside. But for Bosco, the short yardage stuff's kind of their offense. I mean, they make things easy for Sisler with just getting short completions and getting the ball out quickly. And they have guys like Isaiah Alvarez, Zakai Murphy, the tight end Hunter DeTrano, and they could even use Rennick Dorillis, the senior transfer, at times to just swing the ball out to him and get big yards. And it's almost an extension of their run game with how effective it is. But like I said, establishing the line of scrimmage is very important. Getting north and south for both teams is important. But whichever team can be more efficient and creative with that short yardage stuff, I think can win this game and gives himself an edge.
So that's going to be a fun one. The last game at MetLife Stadium, Bergen Catholic trying to go for a historic four-peat, while Don Bosco Prep trying to end that run atop New Jersey football for the Crusaders and win their first title since 2015. Then we will have a game that's moved now to Rutgers Sunday at 1 p.m. Group 3 state final. It's going to be Mainland taking on Old Tappan. And Ryan, Old Tappan's offense, how is this clicking so far right now? Because you have Old Tappan, who had the championship pedigree from a couple seasons ago. They've been really frustrating opponents, and they shut down Pascack Valley. And now with their offense and defense clicking, they're thinking about being crowned champs of Group 3 yet again.
Yeah, Dan, for the offense, I think you have to look right away at Alex Orecchio. He's been incredible for this program. And you might remember that he was the hero against Delsey in that final 2 years ago. He came in for an injured Tommy Caracciolo in the second half, and he threw that go-ahead touchdown. He was Old Tappan's quarterback last year, and they went into this season with sophomore Zach Maselli, who's been great, and he kind of impressed everyone last year with an impressive freshman year. And Orecchio is kind of taking the do-it-all role for Old Tappan this year. And the term athlete is thrown around a lot in football, especially in the recruiting world for kids who can do a lot of different things. But that's exactly who Orecchio is. I mean, he plays mostly receiver on offense, but he can play in the backfield. He's kind of their wildcat quarterback in certain situations, and he plays safety on defense. He can step into the box and play linebacker. He's the team's kicker. He returns punts. He does pretty much everything for Old Tappan. And he's had an incredible year, especially in the wake to the injuries of Ronan Milady and Shane Small. I don't know if they're going to play. Those are big losses for Old Tappan, but they've been dealing with them for most of the postseason. So I'm interested to see what happens there. But Mainland's, going to need to know where number 12 is on the field at all times.
We saw him being a devastating force in their win against Rampo earlier in the regular season of one of our NJ.com broadcasts. And bringing on the show for the first time, Kevin Minnick Well, if we're going to talk about championship pedigree for Old Tappan, you certainly have to bring it up for Mainland. They have a history of blowing out teams from Bergen County. They did that last year at Rutgers in the Group 4 state championship. Now they're a Group 3 team, but they've also gone through an absolute gauntlet in the regular season that has gotten them battle-hardened and ready for this championship run.
Yeah, Dan, we've talked about it in the past about the schedule that they played during the regular season, and the three losses that they have on their ledger, coming to Winslow, Millville, and St. Augustine, all three terrific football teams, all top 20 teams. So, Mainland comes into this game. I think that they are as battle tested as they're going to be. This is a little bit of a different team than the team that went 14-0 last year and took Group 4. They lost significant players off that team. Stephen Ardilli, a running back, who had a bulk of the yards and the rushing touchdowns, and the defensive player of the year in Jamie Tyson, who went on to Villanova. So, they did lose some key players off that team, but at the same time, they did bring back some really good football players and some kids who picked up quality experience last season, and it's translated into them becoming the leaders this year. Quarterback John Franchini is in his third year as a starter. Didn't throw the ball all that much as a freshman. They threw it a little bit more last year, but this year he has thrown the football much more than he has in the past, and he's been much more effective. And Jake Blum, has been his number one guy. He connected with Jake for the 2-point conversion to beat Somerville in overtime in the state semifinal, and he's pretty much been his number one target all year. The first kid in Mainland history to go over 1,000 yards receiving. So, you got to Franchini to Blum is something that's when they put the ball in the air is pretty much been the number one target and the big factor for them, when they want to throw the ball. But, I think still the key to Mainland is running the ball. And Rocco DiBiaso has come on absolutely like gangbusters in the playoffs. He had he was hurt a little bit during the regular season, had a rough regular season that I'm sure he would look back on and think, he wished it was much better. But in the playoffs, he's been absolutely on fire, and he's rushed for overall, I think, close to 700 yards just in the playoffs, and went over 1,000 last week. And he's their leading guy with 16 touchdowns on the ground. So, I think Mainland, while they will put the ball on the air a little bit, I think that the key to this game is it's like any football game. And I've always thought this way, that running the football, if you can run the football, you have a better chance than putting it in the air, because when you put it in the air, bad things can happen. And, you keep the ball on the ground, you generally have a better chance, in my history of watching high school football. And so what Mainland's going to have to do is keep the ball on the ground, and Rocco's going to touch the ball 25 to 30 times like he has pretty much every game throughout the playoffs. Defensively, they've been, there's no superstar on this team. They have no guy this year that has been so head and shoulders over anybody else. They don't have a Jamie Tyson in the defensive backfield like they did last year. But at the same time, they are playing in a state final, and there's only one other team in Group 3 that's still alive. So obviously they've done some really nice things to get to this point in the season. Matt Mewitz is a undersized two-way lineman for them, yet he's got 9 sacks and has found a way to get to the football, and with 21 tackles for loss. And Chase Hogue is a junior linebacker who has really kind of come into his own this year and leads the team in tackles with 116. So, and then you got, Rocco DiBiaso, who is also a terrific linebacker for them as well. So, they're a team that, at the beginning of the season, we look at the schedule, we kind of want to look week to week. Okay, I think Mainland can be a sectional champion. Dropping down to Group 3, they get away from the Winslows and the Millvilles of the world, and in Group 3 this year, figured, okay, sectional title. They go and they win that game last week against Somerville in overtime, in a game that, from all indications, they outplayed Somerville pretty much the entire game. So here they are, state final. Anything can happen, and obviously this is a football team that's gelled and is really playing probably its best football at the right time. So Mainland does it, to keep the ball on the ground, keep them honest a little bit with the passing game. Mainland could be looking at the first team to win back-to-back state championships in two different groups.
So that's going to be a fun one in Group 3 on Sunday at 1 p.m. at Rutgers. And because we have a couple teams that engage in their traditional Thanksgiving rivalries, that then necessitated the creation of a third day of New Jersey high school football state championships. And that's going to move some games now to Wednesday, December 4th at Rutgers. And we'll have the first game of that final doubleheader of the 2024 season to be played for the Group 2 state championship, featuring Rumson-Fair taking on Shabazz. And Mike Kinney, Shabazz, they've been playing outstanding defense all throughout the playoff run. They had a nail-biter in their 8-7 win against Hanover Park, but this is a team that's gelling. We've been talking about the consistency and the chemistry between a lot of their players leading into the state championship run, and now Shabazz is one win away from bringing home a Group 2 state title.
Yeah, Dan, no doubt about it. Shabazz is gelling, and I really think one of the indications of that is when you look at two of the last three games in the playoffs. Westwood, they won 14-6, and Hanover Park, they won 8-7. And not exactly, it wouldn't jump out at you and say, wow, yeah, they're really gelling. That offense is hot. But the fact of the matter is that some of these newer guys who sat the first three games, we saw the first couple games with that, some irregularities there. They weren't always together. It wasn't always cohesive on either side of the ball. And here, if they face some trouble, which they had in both those games, they're staying together. They're playing tough. They're finding ways to get things done together. And that's the indication of a team that's playing good, uniformed football. And that's exactly what Shabazz is doing. And they're relying on their defense. There's no doubt about it. And they've got to rely on their defense against Rumson. Rumson can put up points. Rumson has great balance. And I think the key for Shabazz is going to be exactly what the key has been for them the last couple games, and that's been putting pressure at the line of scrimmage. They've got to meet at Rumson's point of attack. They've got to be there. And defensive lineman David Ukaware has been outstanding the last couple of games. He's sort of been a sleeper star off that line of scrimmage. Devonta Harris, Adekunle Adebayo, and this freshman Darius Cancel has been unbelievable. Coach Naz Oliver put him in the lineup about 6 weeks ago or so. He only played spot and some special teams before that. Put him in the lineup and said, this kid's got to play. And he has been sensational. And he was outstanding against Hanover Park last week. So between the young guys and the transfers, that's really helped solidify this team for Shabazz. And then the linebackers for Shabazz also outstanding. Zayden McDonald, Assad Reynolds, Shamar Myers, and Zykir Best, who's another surprise kid as a sophomore. That defense has got to do the job because we're not sure exactly what the offense is going to give us as far as Shabazz goes. Jalen Klein has been outstanding at times as a running back, but he had some trouble against Hanover Park last week, and that was also true against Westwood 2 weeks ago. So if he doesn't get out at the edge, then that's going to bottle up Romello Tables too as the quarterback. Romello Tables has one of the strongest arms in Essex County and maybe even in the entire Super Football Conference. The thing is, though, he overthrows his receivers a lot. However, when Jalen Klein is getting outside, he's getting on the perimeter and they're moving the chains, he relaxes and he begins to put a better touch on the football. You've seen it. When Jalen Klein runs, Romello Tables throws the ball better. So that's going to be the key against Rumson. Early on, Jalen Klein's got to run the ball behind those big linemen for Shabazz. Makai Dorch and Michael Calhoun and Felix Santiago lead that group. If Jalen Klein is finding some space, then Romello Tables could give Rumson a whole heck of a lot of trouble with that big, strong arm of his. But I say defensive pressure, keep the defense up. That's what's been carrying Shabazz, and that's what can carry him here.
Joe Zadalis, we've seen Rumson-Fair, obviously, throughout the course of this season. They've been a dominant wrecking ball force throughout the shore. Is the third time the charm for them after they've been the runners-up in this Group 2 championship the last couple of years at Rutgers, when now they match up against Shabazz? They have all the makings of a championship team. Can they put it all together against Shabazz and bring home that elusive Group 2 state title?
Well, Dan, I think so far they've showed they seem to have all the bases covered with the way they've played all season. And what I found interesting was when Mike talked about the cohesiveness that is just coming around for Shabazz. That's been there all year for Rumson. The other night we asked head coach Jeremy Schulte, what's the difference between this Rumson team and the last couple and even other teams that Rumson has had in the last 15 years? And the first thing he talked about is that these kids actually like one another. Instead of there being little cliques of 6 or 7 kids hanging out or, being around one another, this team does it en masse. And that's what he said. He goes, not only is this team playing for a ring, they're playing for one another. And that's the thing. Everything Rumson is doing now is team oriented. I mean, just listen to their totals in the state tournament here, Dan. Last week, they had 404 total yards of offense, 325 passing. They were 7 of 8 on third down, 1 for 1 on fourth down. In the state tournament in 4 games, they've outscored opponents 186 to 52. They have 1,472 state tournament yards passing and another 869 rushing. So they're clicking on all cylinders. And the thing that fans need to know about this Rumson team is when I say they play fast, I mean they play fast. They're probably running a play every 30 seconds. What that does is it doesn't give defenses a chance to catch their breath, a chance to make substitutions, a chance to reset. And they've just been phenomenal. Last week, quarterback Owen O'Toole set a personal high with 235 yards passing, but didn't throw a touchdown. First time in 18 games he hasn't thrown a touchdown. He's completing 72% of his passes. He's 231 yards away from 3,000 this year. He's only thrown 3 interceptions. And then you mix in the Rumson rushing game, which has, been successful and really keeps teams from setting their sights on O'Toole. Like I said, last week he threw to 5 different receivers. Nick Thomas, last year's leading receiver, had 11 catches for 128. This year's leading receiver, Jordan Angstreich, had 10 catches for 123. He has 67 catches. He had only 14 last year. And then again, going to the other side of the ball, the way Rumson is playing reminds me of the great Vic Cabot teams at Manasquan, where everybody just did what they were supposed to do. They never, tried to do more than they were expected to do. I mean, this team has forced 22 turnovers. They have 15 interceptions. They have 6 fumble recoveries. Yet the interesting thing is they don't have an exorbitant number of sacks. This defensive line plays disciplined football. They maintain gap integrity. And that's what they did last week against Point Borough. Point Borough rarely got to the edge because the edge was set. Their counters and their inside reverses didn't work because the linemen weren't, 10 yards up the field. So I think the one thing that worries me in this game is the amount of speed Shabazz had. But, as when I talked to Mike this afternoon, the one thing he made note of is Rumson is really well coached. So I'm anxious to see if Rumson can come out against, a really powerhouse defense and put some points up early and make Shabazz play from behind. That's what they have done successfully in the playoffs. They win first down, they get you in the second and long and third and long, and they make you throw the ball, and then they're ready for that. So, I think it has the making of a great game, but I really think Rumson is on a mission, and so far, nobody's been able to even slow them down.
And now looking at the last game of the 2024 football season, it will be for the Group 4 state championship at Rutgers University Wednesday, December 4th, 7 p.m. It's going to be Winslow taking on Phillipsburg. And Bill Evans, Winslow, they somehow, some way found a way to once again outlast Millville in a tight game in their last round. Their second win against Millville this season. And now Winslow, they are tested. they're ready to go as they're trying to bring home the Group 4 state championship against the State Liners.
Yeah, the second time they beat Millville, but in two totally different games. I mean, the first one they completely dominated, won that one 35-7. We knew it would be a different game the second time around, and it was. Millville came out, was running the ball effectively all game. Their pass defense was exceptional. They were getting pressure on Jalen Parker, and really kind of frustrated Winslow for a good half and probably even a little bit more. But I think it was a good thing for Winslow. They've blown out a lot of these teams, and we've talked a lot about how impressive their offense is with Parker and just the numerous receivers that he has that he can go to and the weapons on that team. But they hadn't really been tested much. Earlier in the year they played St. Augustine. It was a tie game at the half, and they ended up winning that one 21-7. That was probably their closest game. And for here to be down 7-0 at the half, and then to have to fight back and get into the fourth quarter tie game and find a way to pull out a win, I think was good for them to kind of face that adversity. Parker probably struggled maybe for the first time in his career. I don't expect that to happen for a second consecutive game. This is also a team, and again, it's, a lot of times we focus on the offense because it's fun and they're so explosive. But, after the game, Bill Belton said, the defense is why we're here. And, out of 13 games this year, they've only given up more than one score twice. This is a very good defensive team with Malachi Brown up front, also heard as one of the best linebackers in the state, in my opinion. A lot of good D-backs, and in that game, Rob Karstarfin, who's a name that maybe you don't hear as much, but he's actually leads the team in sacks. He made a key stop on 4th and 1. Nakeem Powell was the star of that game. He picked up a key fumble. Again, in every game it's somebody different. So again, I think that this is a team that's very balanced, very strong on both sides of the ball, and now knows that it can win a close game if it has to. And I think that's going to bode well for the main event of our championship weekend.
And Mike Kinney, you have Phillipsburg, a team that finally has gotten past the last couple of years of losing in the sectional final. They not only got past that hurdle in thrilling fashion a couple of weeks ago, but then took down a red-hot Rampo side last week with relative ease. So now Phillipsburg has a gauntlet ahead of them. They've got, obviously, their sights set on their traditional Thanksgiving game, which we'll talk about, but also now trying to finish the job and bring home a Group 4 state championship against a very, very good Winslow side.
Yeah, exactly, Dan. When Winslow struggled with Millville, I'm sure there's probably some people in South Jersey and some hopeful people maybe up around the Phillipsburg area who were like, oh, wow, they struggled. This is a great opportunity for Phillipsburg. And I can guarantee you that Frank Duffy, the head coach at Phillipsburg, his expression would have been, uh-oh, because the same thing has happened with Phillipsburg this year, where a couple times they've struggled, like when they lost to Ridge. They came back off that Ridge loss and they played a great game against Hillsboro. They struggled a little bit with West Orange earlier in the season. They came back and they played a great game against St. Joe's. And then they struggled with Northern Highlands, where their rushing game, which has been sound, wasn't really that great. Northern Highlands did a great job of stopping that and also sort of putting the clamps on quarterback Jet Genovese. And Phillipsburg came back and played one of the best games of the season against Ramapo. And what happened, you see how resourceful Phillipsburg is this year. And this was another example of that, because Jet Genovese runs the ball very well. He's an outstanding quarterback. Completion. He's 65% completion rate this year. He's just outstanding with terrific receivers. Matthew Skirbo at the top of that, over 1,000 yards receiving. But he also, out of that multiple eye, he does such a great job of reading the defense. He's experienced. He's a 3-year starter. He's tough. He's athletic, and he's really smart. When he sees opportunities, he makes the right decision. And after the team struggled a little bit against Northern Highlands rushing, he kind of called it on himself, and he rushed for a career high 149 yards in that game, and he scored 4 touchdowns. And now that's something that I think Winslow's going to have to really respect, his running ability. I mean, Sandek is the top running back for Phillipsburg, and Felix Matos is also a very good running back and as well as an excellent receiver. But Jet Genovese is an outstanding runner. he showed that a lot in his sophomore year, where he was like, whoa, he looked like he was really a dual purpose quarterback. Last year, Coach Duffy sort of put the brakes on that. They had strong running, and they said, let's not get hurt. Let's stay healthy this season. And the same thing was true of early this season. Keep him healthy. Let the other guys run the ball. However, we're at one and done territory now. So now we're seeing the Genovese that people saw as a sophomore when he was really, truly dual-purpose quarterback. And that's something that Winslow's going to have to take some notes of. But here's the thing about Phillipsburg. We talk about a Thanksgiving Day game. Shabazz is playing a Thanksgiving Day game as well. They're playing week, and then they're playing in a state final. But I think it's a little different because of two things this year. One is when it comes to that's a very important game for Shabazz or week, and they've been in that situation before where both teams have played on Thanksgiving. But the state championship is still the big thing. It's not so with Phillipsburg. They've got to beat Easton. It's all over school. It's all over. I've said this before on the podcast or on the season. That is the game. The Phillipsburg game, the Thanksgiving Day game at Lafayette College. So here's the thing. What is the emotional state of Phillipsburg coming out of this game? It's never happened before. It's happened before the Phillipsburg game where they've lost, and you've wondered, wow, did they have that game on their mind? So what happens in this Thanksgiving Day game? I think that's going to be the key, and that's going to be the barometer by which we sort of judge what Phillipsburg is going to do on Wednesday based upon what they do this Thursday on Thanksgiving. Will they play well? If they play well, they'll probably be in a great emotional state. If they don't, what's going to happen? Are they going to get themselves up for this state final game? Are they going to feel as though they failed this season because they lost to Easton? They've won the last two. And Easton's a very good team this year. They always are, but they're better this year than they were last year. They're 10-2. It's going to be a really tough game. And Shabazz might rest a few people against Weequahic this year because they're just a better team than Weequahic this year. So they might rest a few guys, at least in the second half. Phillipsburg's not resting anybody. They got to win this game. So you got to hope nobody gets injured. You got to hope, nobody gets overworked in this game. So I think that's really a big key is what happens on Thanksgiving. Phillipsburg is resourceful. They're outstanding. They're well coached. I really like their chances against Winslow because I think they can do a lot of different things. And their defense has been playing outstanding. Linebackers, Genovese is one of them. But Jaden Lucas has been phenomenal. Charles Mena has been outstanding. And the secondary of Felix Matos and Skirbo and Jason Blacknell. That defense has been really holding things together and helping the offense get the ball in great situations. But I think the Thanksgiving Day game is a big key. We'll see.
So that's a rundown of all 7 of the NJSIAA football state championships, the 4 that are going to be played at MetLife Stadium on Friday, November 29th, and then also the 3 games that are going to be played, 1 being on December 1st, as well as then 2 on December 4th at SHI Stadium at Rutgers University. A reminder, fans, that you could watch each and every one of those games exclusively here on NJ.com, live and on demand. NJ.com/watch will get you to our landing page. And again, you could watch every one of those games. You don't even have to venture outside your home. You could settle in and watch our NJ.com broadcast coverage for each of those games. So, because we are thankful for Thanksgiving upcoming here, let's take a look from each of our beat writers, which game catches their eye in these Thanksgiving rivalries around the Garden State, starting off with Ryan Patty.
Yeah, Dan, the game I'm looking at is Patterson Eastside against Patterson Kennedy, and they're playing their 100th ever game on Thursday at Hinchcliffe. And this game's being showcased by Zone 6. So Justin Wimberly over there, he always does a good job. They've had like different arcade games at Hinchcliffe before. So they'll be, there's going to be a lot of fun events there at Hinchcliffe on Thursday. But this game for a while was actually played on Thanksgiving Eve, but it's back to being played on Thanksgiving. And Eastside has an all-time series lead of 48, 44, and 7 ties. What's interesting is that neither of these teams have made the postseason this year, and it's actually the second year in a row that that's happened. Eastside is 3-8, which is the worst season it's had record-wise in the James Magazine era. It's the first season they won't win at least 5 games under Coach Magazine, so that's a little unusual. Kennedy is 3-6, and it's their best season since 2019. So you're starting to see the rebuild from longtime head coach Ron Jackson come along a little bit. But both teams are going to leave it all out there. I can tell you that Eastside should be extra energized because Coach Magazine talked to me before the season about how humbling last year was. So I can't imagine that his team is taking this season well. It's not a typical season for them. I mean, they're definitely taking this one pretty hard, and I'm looking for this game to be a fun one. I think the winner is going to come out of this one very, very pleased, and I think that's some pretty big momentum for the winner going into next year.
So, Bill Evans, what Thanksgiving Day clash do you think draws a lot of buzz in your mind?
Yeah, I'm looking at Pittman and Clayton, two small, very small Group 1 schools. They're in the West Jersey Football League Royal Division. They're longtime rivals. This is the 99th game between the two of them. You know, next year they'll hit their century mark, and I'm sure it'll be a big deal. This has always been a big game because these are two teams that traditionally haven't been contending, for sectional titles or things of that nature. Neither of these teams made the playoffs this year, but they're both pretty good teams. It was actually a shame for Pittman. They were 6-1, lost one game this year before the cutoff by 1 point to Gloucester Catholic, and ended up getting left out. And they've outscored your opposition 289 to 108. This is probably one of the better teams they've had in a long time, and I would really kind of like to have seen them maybe getting into playoffs. Maybe not against the Glassboro or Woodstown, but if they could have gotten a little bit of a better matchup, I think there's probably some playoff teams that they could have beaten. They got couple good seniors. Trey Tinges is a running back that's a very, very nice player, and then Clayton. When you talk to coaches, around, they always tell you about, keep an eye on that number 6 for Clayton, and that's the Demetrius Williams. He's had a phenomenal season, over 1,600 yards, 21 touchdowns. He's had 4 games of over 200 yards. I got to see him when they played Paulsboro, the last game of the regular season, and they were bottling him up, and then all of a sudden he found a seam, and he was gone for a 90-yard touchdown. So he's really explosive. That this will be his last game, and they said the winner will win the division title. I know for Pittman that they had broken a 50-year drought without a division title 2 years ago, so it's going to be a big deal for whoever wins this game. And about 5 years ago, I wrote a story on how the demise of Thanksgiving Day games. There were, at that time, there was 42 games left, and now there's only 19. And this is, you can look at this game, you can kind of see the reason why. I mean, they both had an open date the last week of the regular season. I think if they had played then instead of now, the winner of that might have found their way into the playoffs. Pittman's done a decent job in terms of having a couple consolation games spread out, but Clayton hasn't played since Halloween, so they're going to be kind of rusty, and we'll see if they can be prepared and on point in this game. But again, always a big game between these two close towns, two small schools. It's kind of the game that Thanksgiving Day games were always all about, and the one here goes home with the championship.
Kevin Minnick, what are you looking forward to seeing on Thanksgiving, which possibly is a swan song for one of the greatest players in all of South Jersey history?
Yeah, Dan, we're looking at the longest running rivalry in the state. That's Vineland and Millville. This will be the 153rd time they have played on Thanksgiving Day, a rivalry that started back in 1893. So this is always a game where the records are kind of thrown out the window. Both teams, this is the game that they kind of point to. It's not, I would say it's not as big as the Phillipsburg Easton matchup, but it's along those similar lines. And, Millville will be coming into this game off of a loss to Winslow last week in that state semifinal. But I think these kids are going to be pumped and excited to play. And like you mentioned, this is going to be the last game for Latsier Brooks, 3-time All-State wide receiver heading to Alabama, holds many South Jersey and state records for receiving yards and catches and pass touchdowns. And this will be his last game. And, I did get some confirmation that he will play in this game. He's most likely not going to play the whole game because seniors generally don't play the whole game, but Brooks is going to get his playing time. And it's going to get it's one more time to get a chance to see a dynamic football player and arguably one of the best players in the state take the field and see what he can do. So the winner gets the Victory Cup, which this year will be in named of two former coaches, Tony Cerise from Millville and John Parentazzi from Vineland. So the winner gets the Victory Cup. It's a huge deal between those neighboring towns. And I think what even makes it even better is that, it's an opportunity to see lots of your books one more time.
Mike Kinney, what's the best Thanksgiving Day game that you have your eyes on here this year?
Yeah, I tell you, Dan, I got some classics among the schools I cover. There's no doubt about it. And I know Pittsburgh and Easton is going to be an outstanding game. East Orange and Barringer have been going at it for 112 years, and Shabazz and Weequahic have been going at it for 65 years. But I'm looking at Westfield and Plainfield. This will be the 119th meeting. The game is at Westfield Thursday morning. And Westfield has dominated over the last decade. They've won 11 straight. However, in the last couple of years, Plainfield's gotten closer and closer, and Plainfield's been able to put together a couple strong seasons in a row the last few years under head coach James Williams. You're seeing more consistency than earlier years, and they've closed the gap a little bit. And right now, we're looking at two teams pretty comparable. Westfield's 5-5, and Plainfield's 5-4. Plainfield's been playing pretty good football. They've won 3 of their last 5 games, and Westfield has not been playing so great offensively in their last couple of games. So I think right now we're looking at a little bit of an even field here, and I think Plainfield's got a chance to break that slump, that 11-year slump. They haven't won since 2011. And Kamal Lowry, a quarterback, he's really settled in, and he's only a junior, and he's really shown that he's the guy who's going to lead the team next year. He's done it this year very well. Alameen Watkins, who at one time split quarterback time with him, now he's playing his natural position at receiver. E.J. Brown is running the ball very well for Plainfield. And then you have Joel Cordoba, who's an outstanding receiver, an outstanding defensive back. He's going to Kent State. He leads an excellent secondary that's going to have a big job against Westfield, because Jordan Walsh, sophomore quarterback, was thrust into the lineup. And he's Cole Wheeler still plays some quarterback for Westfield, but Jordan Walsh, quarterback of the future, he's a sophomore. He's done a really good job in the 5 games he's played, the last 5 games. He's thrown for 472 yards, 3 touchdowns, but he's only been intercepted 2 times. And Plainfield's a team that gets the ball out of the sky. They put pressure up front with Alameen Watkins leading that off the edge, leading that rush. And then Joel Cordoba and Aleem Scott and E.J. Brown in the secondary. Man, they cover people well, and they get the ball out of the sky. So they could rattle like a sophomore like Walsh pretty badly. So Westfield's front line is going to have to do its job. And a key for Westfield, too, is going to be the running of Blake Rodow. So you don't have to rely on a sophomore to throw the ball. Can he get some space behind his front line against Plainfield's tough defensive line? That's going to be a key for them. But right now, Westfield's not playing its greatest football. It's been hanging tough. Plainfield has been on the rise a little bit, and they are going to be hungry to end this slump. So that's going to be a really entertaining game. There's only 2 rivalries left on Thanksgiving Day in Union County, Roselle and Roselle Parkway on Wednesday night. So it's a big one in Union County, and I think Plainfield's got a chance to finally get a W.
And Joe Zidallis, what's the best Thanksgiving Day game that you're looking at down the shore?
Well, Dan, I have 2 of them. I think Middletown North, Middletown South is going to be an interesting game, because Middletown North has eaten crow on Thanksgiving Day since 2016. That's the last time they won a Thanksgiving Day game against their rival Middletown South. The 2 teams have kind of switched roles from what it's been the last 8-10 years. Middletown South is only 3-7. Middletown North is 8-1. Their only loss to Mainland in the playoffs. Middletown North has they have an excellent offense led by their sophomore quarterback Owen Robeson. Middletown North has plenty incentive in this game, even more so than ending a long losing streak. Their senior running back, 5'1", Shane Vellante, needs 31 yards for 1,000. I'm sure they'd like to get him that. And this is a senior-heavy Middletown North team, and I'm sure they would like to go out winners. The other game is Wall and Manasquan. Wall needs a victory to share the Class C South title with Homedale. Wall's had a terrific year. This has been their big bounce back year under Eddie Guerreri. And Manasquan is only 5-5. They've given up 259 points, and Wall has scored 355, and that doesn't bode real well for the Warriors. But, hopefully there'll be some pride on the line for Manasquan, and, Wall is trying to get a piece of a title and, prove that their program is back after disastrous hazing situation a few years back.
So that's a breakdown of all the best Thanksgiving Day games all around the Garden State. Traditions still being kept alive all around New Jersey in that regard. So that's the championship preview of all the 7 NJSIAA football finals. Again, it's going to be kicking things off on Friday, November 29th at MetLife Stadium for 4 state championships. Then we will move the scene to Rutgers University on December 1st on that Sunday afternoon for 1 game, and then Wednesday, December 4th for the last 2 games of the New Jersey football season. And a reminder, fans, that from the opening kickoff to the end of the season, NJ.com's award-winning staff of reporters and photojournalists put you in the middle of the action for in-depth coverage of all these games around New Jersey, including photo galleries, recaps, and stats. Be sure to visit NJ.com/HS Sports. We also, again, will have you covered for every one of those 7 state championship games on our broadcast airwaves. You can watch the games live and on demand as an NJ.com subscriber on NJ.com/watch. I'd like to thank my cohorts, Ryan Patty, Mike Kinney, Kevin Minnick, Bill Evans, Joe Zadalis, and our exceptional engineer, Brian Dekine. Also want to give some congratulations out to our buddy, Luis Torres, who just recently got married, and smartly so, was not able to be on this podcast because he wants to stay married, but he'll be back on the beat with the championship games on Friday. So congratulations being sent out to Luis Torres, a newly married man. So for everybody here on the Jersey Blitz, I'm Dan Long saying see you next time as we talk all about how the championship games played out next episode. Take care, everybody.